Yes, because we realize that the NRCS has been a very good partner for Practical Farmers of Iowa, and funding that they have provided us has transcended just about every program that Practical Farmers has been addressing for the last few years. So we're happy to have him. Hope you're all happy to have him. Marty's been a big supporter of Practical Farmers. And without further ado, Marty, I'll let you have the mic.
I so appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and the opportunity to visit with you all here for a little bit. Thanks very, very much for the invitation. It's really quite an honor for me. You hear the phrase, a person is known, you're known by the company you keep. Well, I don't know everybody in this room. But for those of you that I don't know personally, I want you to know that I think you're pretty cool. Because you're hanging out with some really cool people, really doing really wonderful things. Practical Farmers of Iowa is, I think, an indispensable organization. Practical Farmers of Iowa is doing work and providing leadership that is just so very important, and I want to start out, I guess, just conveying my appreciation for this organization, my appreciation for each of you, the farmers that are in this room, that are doing on-farm trials, that are taking the time to do this extra work, stuff that you wouldn't have to do. But stuff that you want to do so that you can learn and so you can add value to your own operations, but then also share that with others. The sense of community and the sense of sharing that is really integral to the mission and the work of Practical Farmers of Iowa is just, like I said, I think it's indispensable. It's really important, and I'm so glad that PFI exists. So glad that you're all here and that you're investing time and energy and your your lives to this work. NRCS, that was I guess a personal thing for me, but I guess as an organization, the Natural Resources Conservation Service in Iowa, we really do appreciate and value the work of Practical Farmers of Iowa on several different fronts. One is that PFI is providing really positive leadership. I never talked to a PFI staffer or a PFI member that's taking the attitude of, woe is me, aren't things terrible, I guess we're just stuck. No, you're solving problems, you're working through problems, you're sharing, you're looking at problems as opportunities, and you're moving forward with things. And I think that's an indispensable, keep using that word, I think that's really an important thing to be doing. Second thing, from the perspective of the Natural Resources Conservation Service, is that you're a reliable partner. You're not only a positive leader, but you're a really reliable partner. And I think that is reflected in the work that we're doing together. Stefan, you talked about the projects that we're jointly funding, that we're working together on, and how they cover a wide range of activities. And I was just reading through those agreements earlier this week, and I'm going to just kind of list off the topics that are covered under the work that we're working on together. Soil health, grazing management, pollinator habitat, diversified crop rotations, integrating conservation planning and farm business planning, personal favorite of mine, providing training on cover crops, on grassland management, work on wildlife habitat, integrating wildlife habitat into farming operations, supporting the work of the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy. And a relatively new project going on right now is working with us to look at how some new conservation decision support platforms can integrate, again, decision-making on the farm, but also integrate conservation into that farm business planning. Alicia is one of our recent people that is learning how to use the resource stewardship evaluation tool, and we're really looking forward, I'm certainly looking forward to how that project moves forward. But we don't do that if PFI doesn't deliver. You know, if the first agreement, if the first grant agreement that we had with Practical Farmers of Iowa had gone south, I don't think the second and the third and beyond would have happened. You know, the work took place. It was reported. It was shared. It was good work, and you all were accountable. Susie, we'll shout out to Susie for the business side of things. You know, we don't ever have problems with accountability with PFI. That's a big deal. You know, partners that we do agreements with where you have to extract reports like it's pulling teeth, or the information isn't straight. You know, you don't really look forward to working with those folks again. PFI really does a great job that way as a reliable partner. And as another characteristic, I think, of PFI that I think is important is the example you're providing for others. And it really goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Always learning, always sharing. I think that the old tagline, maybe I'm getting that backwards, but the learning is important. There's so much to learn, and it all can't flow out of land-grant schools. It all can't flow out of the Agricultural Research Service, or it all can't flow out of corporate-sponsored research. A lot of the learning that needs to take place really needs to take place on the farm level. And really then, that learning doesn't take place, it doesn't do us much good if it's not shared. And so PFI providing a framework for that learning and for that sharing of that information is really key. And I don't think you have to look further than the example of cover crops in Iowa. I think last year there were something like 650,000 acres of cover crop seeded in Iowa, which isn't nearly enough. But I think about where we would be on cover crop adoption in Iowa had it not been for the leadership of PFI and the work that Sarah Carlson has done. We wouldn't be nearly as far along. We were catching up with PFI. You know, speaking for NRCS, we were trying to catch up with you all. I think there are a lot of other organizations in Iowa that were trying to catch up too. And it wasn't like PFI took the attitude of, well, hey, you guys are late to the party. It was always, how can we help you? And the input that we get in the development of conservation practice standards, like our cover crop standard, like other standards, from your involvement, from the work, again, that is taking place in individual farm research trials and then shared, that's really, really important. It's been indispensable for the work that we're doing. And so, again, kudos to you all on that. This morning I had a kind of a cool opportunity. I had the opportunity to do a webinar for the American Society of Agronomy. Pretty heady stuff for a guy with a bachelor's degree in agronomy. So I thought that was pretty great to get that opportunity. And what I talked about during the webinar was the connection between soil health and many other issues. Really the connection between soil health and maybe thinking about it more broadly, sustainable agriculture, and a lot of other issues. And the imagery I used, and I probably should have used a slide on this, and I'm sorry I didn't do that, but the image I used, you can imagine with me, if you will, is an image of a wheel and spokes. And if you can't visualize it, I might call on this table to act out the wheel and spokes, but I'll try to avoid that if I can. Although it would be pretty fun. At the center of that wheel is soil health and conservation. My assertion at the beginning of the talk is that it all starts with the soil. And I'll still assert that here. I think a lot of people here would agree with me on that. And this all starts with the soil in the sense that the things that we do to encourage a healthy soil biome, to encourage a healthy soil microbial community, the whole ecosystem in the root zone. You think about what we want to do that. We want to minimize soil disturbance. I know sometimes in some systems we have to have some disturbance, but we do it thoughtfully, and we don't do it just because we've always done it. So minimizing soil disturbance, keeping a living root growing throughout most of the year, throughout as much of the year as we can. Adding diversity to the system, having diverse plants throughout the year through crop rotations, through using the cover crops, that kind of thing. That's another important principle. Adding livestock, having livestock be part of the system. And there's let's say soil health people help me out. I'm blanking out on the last one, but you get what I mean. The basic things that we need to do for soil health also provide a lot of other benefits to a lot of other resources. Think about that. The things that we do for soil health that build soil aggregate stability, that build soil organic matter, that build soil organic carbon, also then provide a lot of other benefits. Because if we've got a soil that has stable aggregates that can store water, we're going to increase infiltration, we're going to reduce runoff, so we do things like improve water quality, right? If we have a good, healthy soil and a system that promotes healthy soil, we improve water quality. If we've got a living cover on the land all year round, it's good for wildlife. So we provide food and cover for wildlife. We provide food sources, browse sources for migratory wildlife. We also provide a place when we have a healthy, sustainable farming system with diversity, where we're using conservation practices in the right places. We're encouraging pollinator health and safety. We've got a place for pollinators to be. We've got a place for natural pest predators to be. We're doing work. We are encouraging the sequestration of greenhouse gases. We're sequestering carbon dioxide. We're reducing nitrous oxide emissions. If we're doing the things to farm sustainably and to encourage soil health, we're in some ways, especially for high frequency storms, we're reducing flood damage risks. We're bringing the water down into the soil and we're releasing it gradually. And last on my list that I talked about this morning, but certainly not least, we really give ourselves a chance to have a good, sustainable economic situation on the farm. We're using inputs efficiently, we're cycling nutrients in the root zone, we're building resilience in that soil for wet years and for dry years. Nathan, it was so great to visit with you before the dinner, talking about how you grew 237 bushel corn on 2 inches of rain. That's amazing. But that doesn't happen if you aren't doing the things you're doing to protect the soil and to build that soil productivity through the way you're farming. So that was the point I was trying to get across this morning, along with a greater connection then to community. Those are all things that kind of happen at the farm scale, at the field scale. But we've got opportunities then with that kind of farming, the kind of farming that you all are working to learn to do better and helping the rest of us do better. It's really about community as well. When the opportunities that you create by the way you farm and the ways and the enterprise that you're doing, they're good for community. Whether it's adding value to dairy products by making cheese, or or whether it's doing other value-added work, having farming at a good scale, incorporating livestock provides a lot of other economic opportunities in the community. I noticed, Stefan, when you were talking about the mission statement, the new mission statement, it really struck me that the word communities is there. And I mentioned, we all talked about what we were curious about. I said that I was curious about sustainable agriculture as economic development. I really think that's the case. We've got a lot of building to do in Iowa. We've got a lot of building to do really throughout the country. If we're going to reach our environmental goals, let's just take, for example, the Iowa Nutrient Reduction Strategy. If we're going to reduce the export of nitrogen to the Gulf, if we're going to reduce the export of dissolved phosphorus and runoff phosphorus to the Gulf, we've got a lot of capacity building to do. We can't stop at 650,000 acres of cover crops. We've got to have millions and millions of acres of cover crops. We've got to be installing a lot of edge-of-field practices. We've got to be managing nutrients a lot better, whether it's manure or whether it's commercial fertilizer. We need to be transforming a lot of farms away from full-width tillage. Well, that means we've got a lot of infrastructure to build. And that means we've got a lot of business and economic development opportunities that come along with that at all scales. Think about an Iowa. Think about an Iowa that is not brown 9 months of the year, not predominantly brown 9 months of the year. Think about an Iowa that is predominantly green, except for when it's covered up with snow. Think about how that would look. Think about the attractiveness of the state where it's green 9 months of the year. When you think of Ireland, when you hear the word Ireland, what color comes into your head? It's green, right? And it's attractive. That's one part of it. But think about on average, what a busier place Iowa would be if it were green that much of the year. Think about the livestock that could be grazing those cover crops. Think about the work going into seeding cover crops. Think about the work that would take the work of managing those cover crops when it's time to plant with a roller crimper or however those cover crops are going to be managed. Think about the benefits and how the state would look with prairie strips as an important part of the landscape all over the place. Think about what would be happening not only environmentally, but the opportunities that come along with that. That kind of a busier state comes along with a lot of business opportunities and really would help result in a lot of economic development in ways that we aren't doing right now. And it's accessible. It's things that we can be doing. I think about all the young farmers, like many of the young farmers in this room, that could have an opportunity to build their operations, to have a stronger toehold getting started farming with a custom cover crop seeding operation or a custom operation to manage cover crops later in the year. And that's a pretty simple thing, but a lot of that could happen, and that could be many thousands of people. And that's just one example. Sustainable farming as economic development and business development. Your own Sarah Carlson has been an important part of a project that's been going on over the last couple of years. How many of you have heard the term conservation infrastructure? Okay, yeah, there are a few. Sarah is actually the chair of the cover crops group for the Conservation Infrastructure Initiative. It's an initiative that's been very greatly supported by the Iowa Agriculture Water Alliance. Jim Jordahl with IAWA is here, and Jim's been a really key part of that. But the whole idea of the Conservation Infrastructure Initiative is to dream big about integrating sustainable farming, integrating conservation into agriculture more broadly in Iowa, and the business and economic opportunities that would entail. And what would it take to make it happen from a policy standpoint, from a lot of other standpoints? What are the barriers to making that happen? Sarah is providing really, really important leadership on the cover crop front for the Conservation Infrastructure Initiative. But we're getting people coming to the table thinking about conservation that haven't been there before. You know, the Iowa Economic Development Authority is helping to chair part of this. We've got that. We've got people from industry. We've got people from across a spectrum of agriculture in Iowa, including some people very close to PFI, but people from other parts of the agricultural community that are being part of this dialogue and part of this discussion. And last week, that group met and articulated 43 recommendations for state government and a lot of other places to help make that idea a reality. A green Iowa, a reality, an Iowa that has the practices in place, whether it's nitrate denitrifying bioreactors, or whether it's saturated buffers, or nutrient treatment wetlands, or cover crops, whatever it is. What's it going to take to make that happen? And so we're having really useful and good discussions with the Iowa Bankers Association, with folks involved in crop risk management. All of these things that I think it's going to take a while for that whole effort to unfold, but it's important to the future of the state. And again, PFI is being a really important part of helping to make that happen. I think the main thing I want to leave with you tonight is really, I guess, encouraging PFI to keep going and to keep doing what you're doing. Because the conservation community, speaking as a conservationist, the conservation community needs PFI. We need the work that you're doing. We need your attitude. We need your leadership. We need your accountability. We need the way you communicate with each other and the way you communicate with your neighbors. The way you engage Iowa State University, the way you engage us, the way you engage other organizations. Conservation community needs you. I think agriculture, more broadly, needs PFI. We don't have enough places, we don't have enough structures in agriculture for farmers to get together and really share information in a kind of a non-competitive or pre-competitive way. And so PFI, I think, provides a really important niche. I work with other agricultural organizations, and I think they're valuable. I just came from a meeting of the Cattlemen's Association, and they do good work. They really do. They do important work for their industry. But PFI, I think, is unique in the way that you work together. Always learning, always sharing. I hope you never get rid of that tagline. I think it's great. I think also then, looking beyond agriculture, Iowa needs PFI. Over 97%, I think, of Iowa land is privately owned. Much of it is in agriculture, and much of it's of what's in farms is in cropland. Iowa's soils are what makes this a special place on the planet. We don't have beaches. We don't have mountains. We have amazing soil. And we have a density and a quality of agricultural production that's amazing, and it's important. But we've lost half of our soil organic carbon since the time of European settlement. We have, in many places, very, very significantly degraded soil resources. When I started my career with NRCS a long time ago, we talked about minimizing soil erosion, we talked about T values and all that kind of stuff. And I think, frankly, we were looking at, I think the attitude was, well, how can we slow the deterioration? How can we make this system last a little longer? Maybe we can get it past our grandkids to our great-grandkids. It's through organizations like PFI and the work that you're doing that we can look beyond that. How can we rebuild what we've lost, however slowly, but how can we start to not only stabilize but rebuild our soil resources? What can we do to rebuild rural communities by having increased economic activity, leadership development? That's probably one thing I should have talked about a little bit ago. The leadership development that happens here. What are the things that we can do to rebuild our soils, rebuild farms, rebuild communities? And PFI, I think, makes a really unique contribution to that whole effort. You can't do it by yourselves. Nobody can. We all need to be helping with that. Your brothers and sisters that are farming that are not part of this organization, they need to be part of it through whatever organizations that they choose to associate with. But we all need to be a part of it. And again, PFI, through the kind of work that you do and the way you do it, is uniquely positioned, I think, to provide a real beacon of leadership that way. And so I don't know how much time I've taken, Stefan, if I'm under time or if I'm over time. But I guess I do want to leave you with that thought, that we need you, and we're glad you're here, and we really look forward to an ongoing working relationship with PFI across a broad front of topics, and look forward to working with you long into the future. So congratulations, and thanks for letting me share a few thoughts with you tonight.